debate, we are choosing an issue which has been in the headlines over the last week and more, that of Khalistani separatism and the forces that have been working to strengthen this narrative, not just in India, but around the world. In fact, we are, during this next 1 hour, going to focus on the kind of traction and support these forces are getting from around the world. We know the deep linkages that the Khalistani movement has with Pakistan. But why, for example, London is indulging with the Khalistanis? Why the Canadians are so protective of this narrative? What's behind these Khalistani forces gathering steam and strength in far-off places like Brisbane and Melbourne in Australia down under? We'll try to understand and analyze this over this next 1 hour. Joining me, of course, Shawan Sen as well.
Well, in fact, Abhishek, this is going to be a deep dive into why exactly is the Khalistani threat not only to India but to the entire world. And we'll tell you why exactly. And why is that there is a lobby here in India that has always sprung up the moment you've actually said that the Khalistanis are very, very active in India. When the farm laws protests that were taking place, and the moment there were reports that were coming up that Khalistanis were actually involved, the lobby here sprung up immediately and said here that, look, the government only wants to paint everything in a negative manner. And these are very organic, spontaneous reports. But the fact of the matter is that there was always a Khalistani hand, and tonight we expose that once again. So can the Khalistan threat be ignored? That's the weekend debate.
Well, let's begin with the headlines first. After Howrah, violence, arson, stone pelting in Hooghly, BJP's Dilip Ghosh claims convoy attacked.
24 में मोदी जी को पूर्ण बहुमत दीजिए, 40 में 40 सीटें। ये दंगा करने वालों को उल्टा लटका कर सीधा करने का काम ये भारतीय जनता पार्टी करेगी।
Amit Shah attacks Nitish over Bihar. Rioters will be hung upside down if BJP forms the government in Bihar, warns Shah.
मैं बिहार की जनता को स्पष्ट कह देना चाहता हूं और लल्लन बाबू को भी स्पष्ट कहना चाहता हूं, आप लोगों के लिए भाजपा के दरवाजे हमेशा के लिए बंद हो चुके हैं।
Setting the record straight, Shah sends stern message, NDA's doors shut for JDU forever.
Union Home Minister Amit Shah speaks to Governor. 10 companies of the CAPF, including CRPF, SSP and ITBP, sent to Bihar.
Rahul Gandhi likely in Surat tomorrow. Sources suggest he will file an appeal against his conviction.
External Affairs Minister takes on Khalistani elements, say India will not tolerate insult to Tiranga.
All right, welcome back again, ladies and gentlemen. As hunt for Amritpal continues in India, the Khalistani threat abroad cannot be ignored.
Well, the West is yet to wake up to the threat of Khalistani extremism. Events that have unfolded in the past few weeks have only been alarming. Take a look at this report and then we start the weekend debate.
5 years ago, Republic exposed the Khalistani reality in the UK. Paramjeet Singh Pama of the terror group Khalistan Liberation Force faced charges of murder and bombing in India. We showed you how he was regrouping his forces.
My understanding is that you have a great understanding with the United States of America. You have a great understanding with Britain because Britain allows you to voice your opinion and perhaps carry out the activities that you are. And also, for that matter, China is something where you have an active Khalistani office engaging with the Communist Party of China. At that point in time, there is a direct interaction which is with China. So if you really look at that kind of engagement, do you think that this is the strategy and this is the good response perhaps you're getting when you're engaging with several countries like this?
That is what I'm saying. Few things, all I can say that yes, we have got very good response, and we did a very good approach with the legal ways, and the response is unbelievable.
Republic exposed how Shamsher Singh is a key link for both the Babbar Khalsa and the Dal Khalsa, and his National Sikh Youth Federation has just one target.
The armed struggle is the only way. Investing in armed struggle and destabilizing in India with, how they've been operating for the last 30 years, assassinating Indian government officials, attacking military bases, attacking police officers and, soldiers, and, the Khalistanis have a hit list somewhere of all these, people running around like Saini and Alam and like all these black cats and these police officers that escaped so many commissions.
Republic exposed how on paper the Babbar Khalsa is a terrorist group in the UK. But in reality, the British government doesn't really care. It takes a change of name to get away.
The biggest actions of the movements, we've killed 2,700 police officers. Of various rank. We've killed the Prime Minister, the Chief Minister, generals of the army. These are all targeted killings.
Now Khalistanis are attacking the Indian High Commission. The Khalistan is operating in the US. The Khalistanis continue to provoke from the West. The External Affairs Minister has made the Indian stand clear.
Now, if they do not provide security, if they do not take this seriously, if there are incidents like what you saw, there will be reactions from India. The days when India would take this lightly, I want to say, are behind us. This is not an India which will accept its national flag pulled down by somebody in the minority.
Can the West continue to have eyes wide shut approach? Let's debate.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, 5 years ago, we identified this problem and we had already warned that the resurgence of Khalistanis in United States of America, in United Kingdom and Canada is not just a threat to India, but it is a threat to the entire world. And we'll try and explain why, as far as positioning is changing, their entire characterization seems to be changing. But the fact of the matter, their ideology still remains the same, and the West perhaps needs to understand that. Joining us on the weekend debate tonight are Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow of ORF, Ravi Ladwa, writer and researcher joining us from Edinburgh, Aarti Tikku Singh, Foreign and Strategic Affairs expert and founder and editor of The New Indian, Elizabeth Braw, Senior Fellow of AEI, Ray Loker, author and presidential historian, Gabriel Noronha, who's the former special advisor for Iran. Opening up the debate tonight, Sushant Sareen and Elizabeth Braw. Elizabeth Braw, I want to take this question directly with you. As far as the West is concerned, especially the United States of America, even for that matter Canada, they seem to be very squeamish when it comes to dealing with the threat that has been posed by the Khalistanis. And let's be very clear. A think tank of yours, the Hudson Institute, had categorically mentioned about the role that Pakistan plays in nurturing the Khalistanis. Why is it so very difficult for the West to really understand before it actually blows up on your face?
Well, it comes back to the old dilemma in every liberal democracy of freedom of speech versus trying to protect the public, and often it's so hard to define when to intervene. So the intervention only happens after there's been an incident of some kind, and then people say, well, you should have acted long ago. But it's really hard for the authorities to decide when that moment is right to intervene, because they constantly have to protect freedom of speech. And we should remember that especially today, it's the authorities are under constant scrutiny and criticism from various parts of the public. If they intervene, various groups will say, well, you're violating our right to freedom of speech. So this is the dilemma of liberal democracy today. And we should remember also that just as you and I have the right to share our opinions on social media, people with perhaps more malign intent than you and I have also share their views on social media, and as a result gain traction among people who wouldn't otherwise have known about them. So this is really the dilemma of being a democracy today.
Well, in fact, Elizabeth, I beg to differ, but this is exactly what happened when the Mujahideens were basically being armed, and much later you realize that how it became a threat. Sushant Sareen, if I can bring this question to you. They say self-determination, and that is the reason why Canadian MPs say that freedom of speech is being curtailed. Are we really debating about freedom of speech here when it comes to the Khalistanis? Because at the end of the day, when you have the Canadian Prime Minister who's basically almost forced to speak about this entire issue because he's left with no other option but to address his own constituency back in Canada, but forgetting that in the Canadian history, the biggest terrorist attack was actually carried out by none other than the Khalistanis.
Yeah, but Shravan, how many Canadians actually died? Okay, Indian Canadians died. How many white Canadians died in that attack? As long as it does not affect the white man, it's not their problem. Clearly, that's what seems to be the case. And as long as they can get some votes out of these characters, it's all very well. It's perfectly fine. And then, these lectures of liberal democracy and freedom of speech, when it affects the interests of the establishments in these countries, then all of these, these nice sounding phrases and articles of faith actually are thrown in the rubbish bin. We saw that during the truckers movement in Canada, didn't we? We've seen that in how, for example, just because some people have been making memes, exactly the kind of stuff for which so-called fact checkers in India are jailed because they have incited violence or they have tweeted some false information. And then the entire liberal democracies in the West come down like a ton of bricks on India and point fingers that there is fascism and there is Nazism and I don't know what else in India. And the same thing when it happens in their countries, then where does liberal democracy go? Then where does the freedom of speech go? So, so one is, the other aspect of this, Shravan, is, and that's important. Look, I'm all for, absolute freedom of speech, but even the freedom of speech comes with certain caveats. If, for example, you are inciting violence or you're preaching violence, then I think freedom of speech stops out there. Secondly, as far as liberal democracies are concerned, and we've seen that not just in the United States, we've seen that in other countries, that when you see a certain set of people with a troublesome background and a troublesome track record, the security agencies of those countries actually monitor those groups so that they can preempt any terrorist attack. Which is why you will see so many of those people who have not said anything in public simply because they have been in touch with or they have been wanting to go and join a terrorist group that is preempted, even though in many cases it's entrapment, right? But the point is that when you talk about freedom of speech, here are people with a proven track record of violence. These are people who actually carry out in criminal activity. They intimidate people who don't agree with them. They threaten them. They have even assaulted them. And yet when no action is taken against those people, then all you can say is that the governments in these countries are complicit in whatever action these guys do. And they're not honest in dealing with these fellows.
Sushant, since you mentioned, how many people died, I have the exact numbers. All 329 people on board the AI-182, the Kanishka bombing, perished. 268 of them were Canadian citizens. Of course, you mentioned the difference between the whites and non-whites, but Are the Canadians going to be as brazen as that, or the West going to be as brazen as that? 27 were British citizens, only 24 actually Indian citizens. Many of the others might have been Indian origin, but then they were Canadian or British citizens. Also remember, Sushant, that this was part of a twin bombing. In fact, the other bomb exploded at Narita airport in Japan, and that was targeted at flight AI 301. Unfortunately for the perpetrators, the bomb exploded, but then at the airport it killed 2 Japanese citizens. So it's not that others are not paying the price. I want to get in Ray Locker on that note, author and presidential historian, of course. He's live from Washington, D.C. Mr. Locker, just about a couple of years back, I was covering Indian Prime Minister's visit to Washington, D.C., and the summit was happening at the White House, and we had protests outside the White House. As it happens, these Khalistanis were protesting. On the face of it, it looked like a Khalistani protest. But then in the midst of those Khalistanis was a man called Ghulam Nabi Fai, a declared ISI agent, a declared convicted agent of the Pakistani deep state. So the links and the linkages are absolutely clear to anyone who wants to see. Is the problem with the West that the West does not want to see the problem where it exists? And it's the deep Pakistani linkages that these Khalistanis have. You can't be oblivious of that fact, Mr. Locker.
Oh, I'm not oblivious of it, and I don't think the U.S. government is either. I mean, the fact is the United States government does so many things that most people are not aware of, even you, even people who are experts. These guys could be being tapped by the NSA, their communications monitored across the globe. Anything going on in the United States that leads to some kind of criminal activity they could be building evidence on. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight. Doesn't mean that it's the top priority of U.S. officials, but it also doesn't mean it's being ignored.
Okay, you admit it's not a priority. It's not a priority. That is the only problem. Otherwise, you understand the problem.
Look, we understand the problem. We certainly, I mean, I'm not speaking for the U.S. government. I'm just telling you that key people in this country recognize that India is a valuable global partner, trading partner, security partner. Anything that endangers India endangers the United States. I mean, we saw what happened in San Francisco with the attack on the consulate there. People are carrying out violent acts in the United States. But to say that this is the top security priority or the intelligence priority of the United States, I think would be misleading with so many other things happening in the world. But doesn't mean it's being ignored.
Ray, if you say India is a valuable friend, then what message is being sent, Be it the targeting of Indian High Commission in London or the protests in San Francisco and the long, deep history that the Canadian state has had with these Khalistanis. If India is a friend, what message are you really sending to a friend nation?
Well, you're asking me to talk about Canada and the UK. I have nothing to do with them. I'll say that the United States government should have done something about San Francisco if they haven't already. And I certainly hope that U.S. officials are talking to Indian officials and saying, here's what we're doing. Here's why we think this is serious, because it is serious. And I don't think anybody's discounting that. And you mentioned the 1985 AI attack. I actually went to the camp where some of those Khalistani terrorists had actually trained during that time. So I'm familiar with the threat and the scope of the problem, and I know people in this country are too.
Okay, we have somebody from Edinburgh, in fact, from the UK. Ravi Ladva joins us. Ravi, are you getting a sense that post whatever has happened over the last fortnight in London around Indian High Commission, there is a better understanding? I mean, they would have an understanding, obviously, but a better appreciation of the fact that you can't offend India if you consider India your friend. Is that understanding or appreciation of that fact visible on the ground with the British establishment now? I think Ravi,
Sorry,
you have to unmute your button there.
Apologies.
Yes.
First of all, namaste. Thank you for having me. And there's two things that are happening concurrently, which is the first that the West is, and in particular the countries that you mentioned, are waking up to the fact that their democracies and their systems can be weaponized against them. So how they handle that is going to be interesting, especially from a national security perspective. And the second thing that's happening is that they're waking up to the idea that India cannot be no longer treated as a junior partner with these certain things. And how they realign themselves is what we're going to find out in the next 3 to 6 months. A lot of trade negotiations are happening, and the fact that India hasn't signed on the dotted line is actually a boon for itself, because now it can, really put the hammer on and say, we need certain things from a national security perspective and from a diplomatic perspective. And one of the key things that I find interesting is that that's not happening in these debates is the business or criminal aspect of some of these movements. If I'm being perfectly honest, the Khalistani movement, it's a tool, and I want to see, and I'm looking to find out who's holding that tool. There was a long period where nothing was happening with this movement, and all of a sudden it's activated. And, we need to, and if I was, an Indian diplomat currently negotiating that trade deal, what I would ask for is access to review bank accounts to find out where the money is flowing to and from, to ascertain actually what's going on and see if there is a third party involved in some of these separatist movements.
Right. No, but you see, the point is taken, the trade negotiation and those aspects can't be the deciding factor when it comes to India's national security and territorial integrity. We have had our external affairs minister speaking earlier in the day and saying that India of today is not the India which could be taken for granted earlier. The fact that we put up a bigger flag, tricolor, atop the Indian High Commission was as much a message to the Khalistanis as to the British, that we are a changed nation. Is that factor being taken into account? Gabriel Noronha, when the Americans wanted to take down General Soleimani, Qasem Soleimani of Iran, what international rule of law, what freedom of expression, what legal right to defend, what principles were really followed by the United States, for example?
We acted pursuant to Article 52 of the UN Charter, which allows for actions to protect U.S. citizens. So that was completely legal under international law. We did it pursuant to Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, as well as the authorities Congress gave us. So we were doing that completely legally. Any suggestion that was illegal is not true. But it's interesting that you raise Iran, because this is a two-way street.
No, it's about international rule of law, which goes beyond the US Constitution. Mr. Noronha, for example, we also have a law called UAPA, under which we can designate individuals and organizations and terrorists and go after them. Does that give us a right to, for example, send our forces, special forces to Canada?
Not under international law. Nope. Only if it's under pursuant to the UN Charter and under international law can you carry out attacks like that.
Then you are saying what's good for the goose is not good for the gander.
Soleimani was pursuant to international
You are saying
law.
that something which is allowed to the United States, and I want Aarti Tiku Singh and Sushant Sareen to come in here. You are saying that something which is allowed to the United States is not allowed to India.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying if you have an international legal basis to do something, you are welcome to do so. You're under your full rights to do so. Attacking Canada would require that you have evidence that there is an imminent attack on Indian citizens, and that by attacking these, you are disrupting that attack. That would be legal under international law. Unless you have legal proof that that's the case, that wouldn't be a legal act. But again, going back to the larger point, is, if you want the United States to act against the Khalistanis, I think it's important for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to deliver to the State Department a dossier of all the evidence that they are a terror group, and then they could be designated as a foreign terrorist organization.
I'm sure that must have been done, but I don't want to let you go on that. Sushant Sareen and Aarti Tiku Singh, Aarti first and then Sushant. Aarti, you think that something which is allowed to the United States is not allowed to India? In terms of taking down these people who are who are secessionists, separatists, and fueling anti-India sentiments around the world and targeting India's territorial integrity?
Abhishek, the reality is this, that whatever the US is allowed to do, nobody else in the world is allowed to do. I mean, forget India, forget United Kingdom. Look at what is happening in Ukraine. And look what the United States of America did in Iraq or Libya and so many other countries. Do you think they got the permission of the United Nations? Do you think they attacked Iraq? They actually, went to Iraq without a single shred of evidence about weapons of mass destruction. They ruined an entire country, and they are going to preach international law or any kind of law to the rest of the world. The reason that global world order today is in shambles is precisely this, that the United States of America has not honored really any moral code in the last 40, 50 years. The reason that America is today being laughed at for, the domestic politics that is happening, they approve of Khalistanis, they approve of Islamists who are targeting India, who've been targeting India for the last 40 years. And everybody in the world knows that the Khalistani movement, the Islamist movement in Kashmir, both were propped up by the ISI and the Pakistan army, who have been backed by the CIA, who've been backed by the US deep state and the US establishment. This is an open secret. Nobody in the world would believe that the US has been playing a fair game, or they have been following their own rules, which they often like to quote, that there's a rule-based world order. All the rules have been violated by the United States of America themselves. And we will repeatedly see this. The gentleman on the other side of the argument, he said, it's not a priority. Khalistan is not a priority for the US. Of course, it's not a priority, because Khalistan movement is a disruptive movement and a secessionist movement against India. I don't think it's a real threat to the West in any sense. Maybe because, as it is, the West is right now erupting and is so fractured at so many levels. The whole idea of democracy, free speech, all of it's in shambles. Look at their cancel culture. Look at the riots that happened under Black Lives Matter. Look at the kind of January 6th rioting that happened in Washington, D.C. They are a joke in the name of democracy and free speech today. Right, the West, unfortunately, all their institutions, we used to look up to them. We used to look up to the liberal West. But today, they are a joke. They have really ruined all their institutions. They have ruined all their fundamental rights. They have ruined the world order, and they have ruined all the rules-based world.
Wow. That's a lot of crazy conspiracy stuff jammed into one little box there.
Ray Locker, I'll give you the opportunity. I'll give you the opportunity to respond. Ray Locker, just give me a minute.
This is just too much for you.
All right.
Ray Locker, I'll just give you the opportunity to respond, but let me just quickly get into a response from Elizabeth, because I believe she's only with us for a couple of minutes. If Elizabeth is there, we could perhaps take that question. Elizabeth, you've heard what Aarti Tikku Singh has said, and perhaps this is not just the Indian perspective. The Asian perspective has been this, that for several of the problems that today we are facing, it starts somewhere from the United States of America, be it the Russia-Ukraine war. You all know what's really happening there. But having said that, as far as the Khalistani problem is concerned, while Aarti says that, the West perhaps does not really need to think much about it, but I would say that West does need to really think about it, because there are multiple such issues. Your think tanks have constantly said, they've dubbed this entire Khalistani movement as nothing but Pakistan's destabilizing playbook. And we have seen what has really happened every time this continues. So somewhere down the line, Elizabeth, this debate is not about freedom of speech. It is about dealing with none other than terrorists.
Well, it's I maintain it's about freedom of speech and about dealing with extremism or radicalism. And we should remember that radicalism is spreading in all kinds of quarters. We're seeing in lots of countries, in the UK and elsewhere in Europe and elsewhere in the West, lots of people taking refuge in these countries and then unfortunately stretching the limits of hospitality and freedom of speech, which then gets that host country into trouble. I think it's extremely unfortunate, but I would be wrong to blame it all on the host country. And then with regards to US leadership in the world, I'm not American, so I can say this, I think we are better off with US leadership in the world than Chinese leadership, which at the moment is the alternative we are facing. And if we look at the role that China plays vis-a-vis other countries, large and small, it's not a positive role. We wouldn't want China to replace the US as a superpower, as imperfect as the US may be. And then the second thing that I think needs to happen is that countries will need to take a second look at how they treat freedom of speech, because freedom of speech is being taken for granted, is being pushed to the extreme by so many different groups. And so it could be because it's being taken to the extreme by so many different groups, but that we all have to adjust to some sort of much smaller definition of space of freedom of speech, because some people have exploited it, and it would be extremely unfortunate. But that is not something that we can pin on certain governments alone. It's something that's happened.
It's not as simple as it seems.
Lots of different people, lots of different groups have unfortunately been taking advantage of the new opportunities offered, especially by social media platforms.
Elizabeth, it's not as simple as it seems, and it's not about a group of people coming together and saying that this is about self-determination. In fact, Sushant Sareen, back in the 90s when Bishan Singh Binder was actually trying to secure explosives, rifles, Stinger missiles, I don't think so. That was for some sort of self-determination or some sort of a peaceful resolution. Bishan Singh Binder was accused back in the 1990s, and that too for large-scale procurement of explosives. So we are not dealing with people who are looking for any sort of peaceful resolution. Their single point agenda is disruptive means and terrorist means, and that has been documented, not just by us, it has been documented by several other countries, Sushant.
Yeah, which is precisely the point I was making earlier. That look, one is that, there is a bunch of people who claim to be dissidents. We will say that they are in the pay of the Pakistanis, and there is adequate proof of that. But even if, for example, you admit that, okay, fine, these guys are agitating for some lost cause, they're free to agitate, they're free to protest, they're free to do everything. But there are certain red lines that nobody crosses. My problem with many of the Western countries is that despite the fact that these guys are crossing those red lines, you are not shutting them down. And that is what I find inexplicable. That when they are preaching, when they are openly making hate speeches, they are actually intimidating, they are threatening, they are assaulting your own citizens. Okay, those might not be white citizens, they might be of Indian origin and Indian heritage, but they are assaulting your citizens, right? You don't take action against them. They are seen to be openly preaching violence. You don't take action against them. If they were just doing, the normal political activity, maybe carrying some flags and protesting, nobody would have said anything. But when they start assaulting the Indian mission in many of these countries, to my mind, I think that's a red line. For example, how would the Brits or the Americans or any of the other countries react if similar things were to happen, for example, in India, right? That their embassy is assaulted, that their diplomats are assaulted, they're accosted and they're assaulted. How would they react? So clearly those are red lines which are being breached on a daily basis, and yet action is not being taken, and that is the problem I have. It's not about freedom of speech. There are enough madmen all over the world, so they can keep raving and ranting and protesting and demanding whatever they want to. They're not going to get it anyways. But isn't it the responsibility of these countries to crack down on these guys? So that is one part of it. The other part of it is, okay.
Yep.
No, so Sushant, you made an important point. I want to take this to Ray because he wanted to add to it. But then, Ray, the question is, as Sushant says, certain red lines have been crossed and we don't see a reaction. A protest happens. You would say you are not speaking on behalf of the British establishment, but we have to understand what's happening and analyze. A protest happens outside the Indian High Commission in London. The security perimeter of the High Commission is breached. There is vandalism that takes place. Protests are registered. The senior most diplomat of the UK in New Delhi is summoned and a demarche issued. And then 3 days later, same protests happen. The only difference this time is that the protesters are allowed to do whatever they want to do from across the street. And maybe little more deployment of cops. That's the only difference that comes in. So in a way, you are sending across a political message to these elements that they have an element of political protection on the British soil, on the American soil, on the Canadian soil. That message of political protection to these elements is something which emboldens them with every other attempt at intimidating Indian establishment there, and also, as Sushant mentioned, even if of Indian origin, their own citizens who don't agree with them. And what about the freedom of expression of those who don't agree with them there on their soil?
Well, I would say that anybody who crossed the threshold of that mission in London, who ripped down that flag and who wasn't arrested, should be arrested. And shame on the British authorities for not doing something about it. If that happened to a U.S. facility in India, it probably wouldn't happen because there are Marine guards there who probably would have shot the people. That's the big difference. And we can debate whether U.S. troops should be there doing that in the first place. But look, there is a certain element of hypocrisy in basically everything the U.S. government does. We think we can do whatever we want and other people can't. That's been happening for years. I mean, I don't defend that. But I will say I don't know of any deep state in the United States. I know that there are people in various institutions who hold certain beliefs. They don't all agree with each other, but there is no deep state.
Oh, Ray, there is no deep state in the United States. That would call for another round of debate.
There isn't.
I mean, yeah,
there
United States is a friend, but you can't get away by saying the US has no deep state.
It does not have a deep state. No.
All right, and aren't those movies? Don't those movies have input from the CIA?
Inspired by
some do, some don't. And hey, look, don't get me to defend the CIA, but it's
okay. So you admit to that. But on a more serious note, you admitted to some element of hypocrisy. Gabriel, you have worked with Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo is a friend of India, and we would want to believe that. You were saying that if there is evidence, please share. Forget about the deep state. I think in the kind of mechanisms that are there between India and the United States, all sort of evidence sharing happens. It's just not possible that the Americans don't know the deep linkages that these Khalistanis have with Pakistan. And Pakistan obviously is not a friend of the United States. Gabriel, can we be a little more honest about it?
Sure. Look, I think we know that they're affiliated with Pakistani intelligence. I think that's probably likely. I think it's likely that they have conducted some acts of terrorism. This is not up to the whims of a politician. This is up to lawyers who have to make a legal determination in our system. Does this constitute officially terror activity? If it does, then it can be prosecuted according to the full extent of the law, and individuals who provide money to the Khalistani movement can be prosecuted as well. That determination hasn't been made. So again, I think this is incumbent on the Indian government to make a very strong legal case to the American government if this is exactly what they want to do. I'll admit, I haven't seen anything.
So what you're suggesting is it basically boils down to the American law. If there are no provisions in American law to take care of Indian concerns, till the time that the Americans themselves are hit, nothing is going to happen.
Sorry?
I'm saying, so according to you, it boils down to the fact that unless there is a provision in American law or the American interests are hit by the Khalistanis, nothing can be done.
No, it doesn't. No, that's not required. If you're a terrorist group that kills, 100 Indians, that's enough. If you can be shown that it is terror activity, that they behave like a terrorist
in fact, that has been
organization,
shown.
it doesn't matter who the victims are.
That's exactly what happened with the Kanishka bombings.
Lots of other organizations which have not killed Americans.
But that's exactly what happened with the Kanishka bombings. Everything was there available to the RCMP to see.
Several of them, Abhishek, have been on the run. In fact, if I can take that, just a quick question to Aarti also. Aarti, 5 years back when we in the Republic had tracked down one of the fugitives, Paramjit Singh Pamma, accused of the bombing that took place in Punjab, was on the run, finally got the Interpol notice off his head. But at that point in the question that was essentially asked to him, we had asked him this question, that what do you essentially see as Khalistan? To which his first answer was, it's the Indian Punjab. I said, when I asked him this question in the sting, that what about Pakistan Punjab? There was no response. So it was very clear in that sting, they had made it abundantly clear that the money was essentially coming in from China. The money was actually coming in from Pakistan. And it's an admission made by the Khalistanis themselves in a sting operation carried out by the Republic Media Network 5 years ago. So for the West to say that this is not Pakistan's playbook, perhaps they're just blindfolding themselves.
It's a very pertinent point you actually raised. This China-Pakistan axis, the channel, the kind of equation they have developed over the years, that is something that the United States has completely overlooked and, in fact, either seem to be completely ignorant about. The way, if you remember, for a very, very long time, they were also oblivious to the Islamist threat. They were oblivious to the point of September 11. And then suddenly they realized that, oh, it was coming home. And now exactly they are, if you honestly ask me, Team Biden actually is expediting this whole relationship between Islamabad and Beijing. They were not worried about when CPEC happened. They are not worried about when China actually got so much of territory of Jammu and Kashmir from Pakistan. They have not been worried about the standoff between India and China along the line of actual control. They are not really worried about China taking over the world. And that is really a tragedy. It is a tragedy that Team Biden is actually facilitating it by not taking cognizance of Khalistan movement. They are not taking cognizance of the China-Pakistan partnership. So honestly, I feel it's a tragedy for Americans more than anybody else, because for us, we've always looked up to the US. We have been pro-US always, no matter whether before Cold War or after Cold War. The ideal or the kind of inspiration that we drew, it was always from the American dream. But now that dream is actually in tatters, and thanks to the Biden administration, they are letting Pakistan and China have this whole thing blowing up in their face.
Yeah, I take this, Ravi. I can see your raised finger. I'll come to you, but I'm told Elizabeth has to go, so I'll take this question to Elizabeth first. Elizabeth, you were sort of admitting to the possibilities or consequences or implications of the changing world order. And in that broader context, this China angle, where China, through Pakistan, is possibly bankrolling all these Khalistanis, not just based out of India, but based out of anywhere in the world, in Europe, in Canada, in the United States. You think for the sake of that changing global order and the possibility of Americans trying to sort of delay this change. Obviously, it's inevitable. Sometime China would, overtake the Americans in terms of the size of the economy and hence their geopolitical clout. Shouldn't the Americans be a little more sensitive to Indian concerns, if for nothing else, to stave off China's rise for a while? Just be practical Americans.
Well, I think regardless of whether China is involved in this case, what is clear is that China is not a force for good in global politics. We're seeing, for example, China playing a very duplicitous game when it comes to the Ukraine war, saying that it wants peace, but then in practical terms supporting Russia, for example, by buying Russian energy. And we are seeing we have seen over a number of years now China lending money to developing countries, knowing that the terms are such that those countries can't pay it back. And now we're seeing those countries default. That is not the country that is wishing good things for other countries. And we are also seeing, for example, China playing a very dubious role within the United Nations when it comes to the persecution of the Uyghurs and getting countries to vote in support of its position against the Uyghurs. So all of this points to a country that doesn't act with morals or ethics in mind, but rather purely based on power politics. And we can say the US has acted shabbily on many occasions over the years, but at least has tried to act as a force for good on many occasions, for example, now in supporting Ukraine. And so, yes, coming back to your question, what is already happening is that the emerging Western bloc, of which the US is part, is discovering that it will need to be much more understanding towards countries that it wishes to play on its team, as it were, because China will try to court those countries as well. They include India, they also include Middle Eastern countries, they also include sub-Saharan African countries, and all kinds of countries that haven't already chosen a side, so either the Western side led by the US and the European Union and the UK, or the side led by China. So we'll see. I think it's inevitable that we'll see a lot more of those charm offensives or more understanding attitudes being directed or extended to India and smaller countries.
Well, I don't know if the charm offensive has really worked for whatever India has done of late. But Ravi, since you are there in the UK on the ground,
sure.
What are the options available? Like, can we sort of, put some pressure on the London establishment by, for example, delaying the talks on free trade area, which is something which the UK really badly needs?
Yes, you can, but I think there's a fundamental issue at hand, which I don't think the Indians recognize, that bribery has, at least for the politicians, become legalized, especially in the US. There were two landmark cases, Buckley v. Vallejo and the Citizens United versus the FEC, which essentially said that we can pour as much money, foreign or domestic, into their elections. Now, if I'm, through super PACs and through whatever it may be, I, as a foreign adversary, or, just for whatever agenda that I have, want to pour money into these elections, and these politicians are then obligated to parrot whatever I need them to parrot, and there's ample evidence to support this. So, and even in the UK, in the recent weeks, what we found is that politicians for £10,000 can be bought.
That's a crucial point you're making, Ravi. I really need to take this because we would be ending the debate in the next 3 minutes. Gabriel, you were sort of not agreeing with what Ravi is saying, but the fact of the matter is that it's likely that the internal dynamics of local politics, be it in the UK, in Southall, for example, be it in Canada, in British Columbia, for example, or down under now, increasingly in Melbourne, for example, the local politics and the compulsions of pandering to these people as constituents is perhaps influencing this indulgence with these separatists who want to attack India's territorial integrity. So your politicians are sort of playing with them for their narrow political objectives.
So I don't think that's right for a couple of reasons. One is U.S. law prohibits all foreign contributions, including to super PACs. So there's no foreign money in U.S. elections. Anytime there is, that's very illegal and it's prosecuted fully under U.S. law. The other thing, unfortunately, is that, look, the reality is Indian Americans don't have any influence in American politics. It's just not the case. They're not very politically active. They're not large donors to campaigns. And most members of Congress, I worked in Congress for 4 years, don't really care if there's one campaign contribution from, a Khalistani that's going to make them write a letter. Again, this issue is not very salient in U.S. politics right now. This is something much more at the State Department level, at the White House level. It is not being influenced by local politicians. I've been in the system for 8 years. I would tell you if I thought it was different, but this is just not the case.
Well, in fact, just one last word with Sushant Sareen as the way forward. Sushant, you've seen our guests from the West making it abundantly clear that this is not a priority. One way or the other, they say that it's your problem, you deal with it. And we've, somewhere down the line, perhaps I would say the Indians where we have essentially failed, and let's see what has really happened in the case of Canada. When the National Investigation Agency went to Canada, they had to come back empty-handed. The fact of the matter is that, as Ray Locker was saying, that had this happened, these images had happened outside the US embassy, not a single person would have been anywhere closer. By now, they would have been gunned down. Is the namby-pamby approach somewhere down the line makes it even more difficult?
Yeah, so look, one is the security aspect of our missions, right? And clearly those need to be beefed up. If the local authorities are not able to provide adequate security, then I think it is well within the right of the government of India to demand that, we will secure our own sites. And for example, if you had armed guards, the moment that this guy intruded into the building, you could have fired on him, because who knows what he's carrying? He could be carrying he could be wearing a suicide vest, for all you know. So I think one is that aspect of the security dimension. The other aspect is, I think something you have to understand. Most of our, the guests are from the West. I think the point which they make is understandable up to a point, simply because, let's face it, this whole Khalistan brouhaha has happened over the last 5-6 months. It's really become quite salient. It's in your face in the last 5 or 6 months, even in India. Before that, there were these noises which were being made, but how much focus was there, as far as the Indian public discourse is concerned? But now it is on the center stage. So I think some things might start changing even in some of the Western countries who are our partners, the US in particular. I don't expect much coming out of Canada, but I think US and to maybe some extent even the UK, but I really have no hopes from the UK, I'll be very honest. And I think finally there is another point which we have to understand, which is that I think the larger Indian diaspora needs to get its act together. The guys who are the Khalistanis, even within the Sikh population, is a minuscule minority. The only thing is that they're very organized, they're very vocal. They are like any gang, a gang.
And they're well funded.
20 or 30 or 50 members. Yeah, of course, they will get the funds. Funds is not an issue, right? But a gang, for example, will be very well organized and actually can bring an entire neighborhood under it, right? So these guys are very well organized. They are so visible and vocal that they actually give an impression that politically also they are very powerful. And I think that myth needs to be broken. And that can only be done by the Indian diaspora. Unfortunately, the Indian diaspora acts a little to effect in many of these countries. And I think that is a bit of a problem.
Sorry, I think of late we saw some activism coming in from the Indian diaspora, particularly in the United Kingdom, Sushant. But fact of the matter is that political patronage of these foreign capitals plays a role. At the end of it, of course, it's our problem. We'll sort it out sooner or later, irrespective of whether these nations are a little more sensitive to Indian security concerns. On that note, Shravan, I think we have to bring this conversation to an end. Thank you so much, all of you there, Sushant, Aarti and Ravi, for joining us. And Shravan, hopefully Amritpal would be arrested and we would be getting to grips with this issue?
Well, in fact, all eyes would essentially be on how exactly the government basically acts on it, the Punjab government, and also for that matter, the centre. But as far as the Khalistani issue is concerned, that remains not just an Indian problem, but also the problem for the West. Thank you very much for joining us on the Weekend Debate.
11,000 placements last year. At Amity, we are committed to nurturing passionate, hardworking and proactive professionals.
हावड़ा में अभी भी 144 जारी हुआ है और कुछ जगह में अभी भी इंटरनेट को सीमित कर दिया गया है। रामनवमी के दिन जो शोभा यात्रा निकली थी इस शिवपुर में, उसके ऊपर हमले हुए ऐसा आरोप लगाया गया है और उसमें पत्थरबाजी भी हुआ और ऐसा तांडव मचाया, पूरा इलाका तोड़फोड़ किया गया है। जो शॉपिंग मॉल का जो कांच था वो पूरा टूट चुका है। सीसीटीवी भी तोड़ने का कोशिश किया गया और सीसीटीवी जलाने का भी कोशिश किया गया। यहाँ पर बॉम्बिंग भी हुआ, पर की शीशा जो है वो टूटा हुआ है। दुकान जो भी मिला उससे तोड़ दिया गया।
जब भी आपका मॉडल स्टेबल हो गया संजीव, उसके बाद नेक्स्ट आपने कौन सा वेंचर, जीवन साथी आया उसके बाद?
97 में नौकरी लॉन्च की हमने, 98 में we launched जीवन साथी. 3 years later we had 4 million people on the internet, and then we said we are not just a jobs company, we are a online classifieds company. तो वहां से then we said 99 acres, because वो भी एक और कैटेगरी है.
हाँ, घर सबको चाहिए, दुकान सबको चाहिए,
प्रिंट में ऐड होती है, वो कैटेगरी को गिवन इंटरनेट ऑप्शन.
जी.
सो जॉब्स हो गया, मैट्रिमनी हो गया, रियल एस्टेट हो गया, वी आर अ 4 वर्टिकल कंपनी नाउ.
Howrah is becoming the center point of Bengal politics, and a lot of developments are there. We have shown what you are writing, the very strong words you have written. But what is your first reaction on camera, sir?
Strong words are followed by strong action. Strong action will be taken. Under no circumstances will anyone be allowed.
You know, we have seen in the last few days some incidents in London, something in Canada, a little bit in Australia, in San Francisco. There is a very small minority, okay, but there are behind that minority, there are many interests. Some interests are of neighbors, all of you know which one. Some interests are actually of people to try to use it for, visa and for personal interest that they.
You were amongst the few pioneers who started this. ये कब शुरू हुआ आपका naukri.com का मामला?
So when I was in HMM, there were 7-8 of us, 10 of us maybe, the marketing team. We would sit in an open hall, and I observed something very strange. I observed that every time the office copy of Business India would come in, सब लोग वो magazine को पीछे से पढ़ते थे, क्योंकि at the back of that magazine were 35-40 pages of appointment ads, jobs. And I realized that every time it's a different headhunter with a different job in a different company, and these jobs are not advertised, and that's how we started.
हावड़ा में अभी भी 144 जारी हुआ है और कुछ जगह में अभी भी इंटरनेट को सीमित कर दिया गया है। रामनवमी के दिन जो शोभा यात्रा निकली थी इस शिवपुर में, उसके ऊपर हमले हुए ऐसा आरोप लगाया गया है और उसमें पत्थरबाजी भी हुआ और ऐसा तांडव मचाया, पूरा इलाका तोड़फोड़ किया गया है। जो शॉपिंग मॉल का जो कांच था वो पूरा टूट चुका है। सीसीटीवी भी तोड़ने का कोशिश किया गया और सीसीटीवी जलाने का भी कोशिश किया गया। यहाँ पर बॉम्बिंग भी हुआ, पर की शीशा जो है वो टूटा हुआ है। दुकान जो भी मिला उससे तोड़ दिया गया।
जब भी आपका मॉडल स्टेबल हो गया संजीव, उसके बाद नेक्स्ट आपने कौन सा वेंचर, जीवन साथी आया उसके बाद?
97 में नौकरी लॉन्च की हमने, 98 में we launched जीवन साथी. 3 years later we had 4 million people on the internet, and then we said we are not just a jobs company, we are a online classifieds company. तो वहां से then we said 99 acres, because वो भी एक और कैटेगरी है.
हाँ, घर सबको चाहिए, दुकान सबको चाहिए,
प्रिंट में ऐड होती है, वो कैटेगरी को गिवन इंटरनेट ऑप्शन.
भाग रोड हो रही, पुलिस हमारे ऊपर टीयर गैस फेंक रहा है, बम का आवाज आया, पुलिस ने भी टीयर गैस फेंका, तो सब मिलाकर के एक मसाकार स्थिति है।
Violence, arson and stone pelting in Hooghly during BJP's Shobha Yatra. The BJP claims multiple people injured.
24 में मोदी जी को पूर्ण बहुमत दीजिए, 40 में 40 सीटें। ये दंगा करने वालों को उल्टा लटका कर सीधा करने का काम ये भारतीय जनता पार्टी करेगी।
Shah takes on Nitish government over Bihar's law and order, says rioters will be hung upside down if the BJP forms the government in Bihar.
मैं बिहार की जनता को स्पष्ट कह देना चाहता हूं और लल्लन बाबू को भी स्पष्ट कहना चाहता हूं, आप लोगों के लिए भाजपा के दरवाजे हमेशा के लिए बंद हो चुके हैं।
Amit Shah once again sets the record straight, reiterates NDA's door shut for JDU forever. Days after protesting Rahul Gandhi to challenge his conviction in court, Congress calls Kada to support Rahul.
This is not an India which will accept its national flag pulled down by somebody in the minority.
External Affairs Minister sends out stern message to Khalistani elements, says India will not tolerate insult to the Tiranga.
जो सावरकर जी का बार बार अवमान करते हैं, उनको मुंह तोड़ जवाब है और उनका निषेध करते हैं, हम सब लोग धिक्कार करते हैं।
Days after Rahul Gandhi insulted Savarkar, Shiv Sena and the BJP hold Savarkar Gaurav Yatra across Maharashtra. Viewers, you're watching India's #1 news network, Republic. I'm Shivangi Shukla. In a fresh incident of violence, clashes broke out during the BJP Shobha Yatra in West Bengal's Hooghly district. BJP Vice President Dilip Ghosh alleged that the people in the procession were walking peacefully to the Jagannath temple, and when the stones were hurled at them, BJP's MLA Biman Ghosh has been reportedly injured in stone pelting and rushed to a hospital. A heavy police deployment there has been made in the area to prevent any further flare-up.
देखिए, इतनी लंबी शोभा यात्रा, पूरा टाउन घूम रहा है, हजारों लोग हैं, बच्चे हैं, महिलाएं हैं, उनके ऊपर अचानक पथराबाजी होती है। हावड़ा का दूसरे घटना होने के बाद भी सरकार कितना सचेत है मुझे समझ में नहीं आ रहा है। तो पूरा समाज को जो अस्त-व्यस्त किया जा रहा है, प्रोवोक किया जा रहा है, इसका अगर प्रतिक्रिया हो तो इसका जिम्मेदार कौन होगा? ममता बनर्जी केवल राजनीति देखती हैं, नहीं तो आज ये होने की कोई संभावना ही नहीं था। पुलिस अगर पहले से और नजर रखता है जहां गड़बड़ होता है, जो लोग गड़बड़ करते हैं, तो ये घटना नहीं होती। पत्थरबाजी हुई, गाड़ी तोड़ा जा रहा है, लेकिन जो बच्चे और महिलाएं हमारे साथ आए थे उनके ऊपर क्या होगा? वो स्टैम्पेड हो जाएंगे। भाग रोड हो रही, पुलिस हमारे ऊपर टीयर गैस फेंक रहा है, बम का आवाज आया, पुलिस ने भी टीयर गैस फेंका, तो सब मिलाकर के एक मसाकार स्थिति है। हम देखते हैं कहां तक हम यहाँ खड़े हैं, बहुत सारे लोग इधर उधर बिखरे हुए हैं, उनको भी घर पहुंचाना है।
Viewers, a total of 10 companies of the Central Armed Police Force have been sent to Bihar after violent clashes erupted during Ram Navami celebrations in the state. Now, the state police said that the situation across the state is completely normal. More than 100 people have been arrested in Nalanda and Sasaram in connection with the violence. Here are the developments so far.
Following violence in Nalanda, the situation is tense.
Late last night, one person was apparently
killed and 2 injured. And this incident has been going on for the past couple of days after the Ram Navami procession took place, when 2 groups clashed. And here we can see that the Rapid Action Force is doing a flag march in the Bihar Sharif town area.
And the Home Minister, who was scheduled to visit the region, could not.
सासाराम में लोग मारे जा रहे हैं, गोलियां चल रही है, मैं वहां नहीं जा पाया। मैं सासाराम की जनता का यहीं से क्षमा मांगना चाहता हूं और मैं कहना चाहता हूं, मैं सासाराम जरूर आऊंगा। मेरे अगले दौरे में सासाराम में ही महान सम्राट अशोक की स्मृति में एक सम्मेलन करने का काम हम करेंगे।
Amit Shah launched a scathing attack on the law and order situation under the Nitish government.
24 में मोदी जी को पूर्ण बहुमत दीजिए, 40 में 40 सीटें, और 25 में भाजपा की सरकार बनाइए। ये दंगा करने वालों को उल्टा लटका कर सीधा करने का काम ये भारतीय जनता पार्टी करेगी।
The JDU responded politically.
और 1600 पुलिस के जवान अमित शाह आपके कार्यक्रम के लिए प्रतिनियुक्त थे, वो सासाराम में मौजूद थे। फर्जी बात कहा कि 144 लगा है, मैं मानहानि का मुकदमा झेलने को तैयार हूं। माननीय अमित शाह जी, हम लोग डरने वाले नहीं है आपके सीबीआई, ईडी और आईटी से, कोई नहीं डरने वाला है। अगर कलेजा में दम है, ये मैं बोल रहा हूं कि सासाराम में लोग मारे गए, उसका नाम जारी करो।
The BJP is hinting at a conspiracy.
आप उठाकर देखिए, अगर मार्च महीने के आंकड़े को देखिएगा तो जहां 4 दर्जन के आसपास जहां रेप हो गया हो, जहां मौत और संदिग्ध मौत जहां 200 से अधिक हो गया हो, इतनी बड़ी संख्या में आपराधिक घटना 1 महीने में हुई है। आप सोचिए कि वहाँ की कानून व्यवस्था क्या है। यहाँ महागठबंधन की सरकार, नीतीश जी और तेजस्वी जी की सरकार, यहाँ न विकास से उसको मतलब है, न विधि व्यवस्था से है, न बिहार वासियों के जान माल की रक्षा से है, किसी से नहीं। यह सरकार बिल्कुल नकारात्मक हो गई है, नकारात्मक सोच की है। सरकार विधि व्यवस्था को चौपट कर रखी है, अपराधियों को यहाँ संरक्षण मिल रहा है और अपराधी खुलेआम घूम रहे हैं।
The Nalanda clashes have become a political flashpoint. Bureau Report, Republic TV.
Viewers, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi met Sonia Gandhi ahead of his appearance in a Surat court to appeal against his conviction in a defamation case tomorrow. The meeting went on for more than 1.5 hours. He was accompanied by his brother-in-law Robert Vadra as well. Here is what happened.
Ten days after Rahul Gandhi was convicted and sentenced to 2 years in jail, 9 days after Rahul Gandhi was disqualified from Parliament, Rahul Gandhi is likely to appeal before a Surat court. Rahul is likely to remain present in the Sessions Court when the plea against his conviction will be filed. The appeal will challenge the lower court's order. Senior state and national leaders of the Congress will accompany Rahul Gandhi to Surat. Rahul Gandhi was held guilty for his 2019 remark about thieves with the surname Modi. The court had granted him bail and suspended the sentence for 30 days to appeal in a higher court. Bureau Report, Republic TV.
An audio clip, viewers, has been going viral where an alleged Khalistani group is heard threatening the CM of Assam. This comes in the backdrop of Amritpal's aides being taken to Assam. The state police have taken cognizance and alerted all the SPs in the matter. The case has been registered and an investigation is underway. Sources suggest that the matter has been taken up with the central agencies as well. Republic spoke to the Assam DGP on the same. developments. Listen into what he said.
In the afternoon, some journalists in Assam had received a pre-recorded audio clip wherein one gentleman called Gurpatwant Singh Pannu had threatened the Honorable Chief Minister of Assam, saying that there have been various instances of injustice to Sikh community in Assam. Subsequent to that, we have registered a case in this regard with the STF police station in Assam, and investigation has started. We would go to the bottom of it as to who are the people who are behind this and are there any conspirators, and the voice that has been recorded, is it actually of Gurpatwant Singh Pannu or not. However, since the case relating to Sikh for Justice was initially investigated by a team led by me when I was in NIA, so I have heard thousands of audio and video clips of Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, and prima facie I am quite convinced that this is his voice. However, the forensic examination needs to be done. As far as Gurpatwant Singh Pannu is concerned, he is New York based, as you are all aware, and there are LOCs issued by various central investigation agencies and state police organizations against him, and he is a designated terrorist under UAP Act of India, and the organization that he heads, Sikh for Justice, is also an unlawful association under the provisions of unlawful activities. As far as the threat to Honorable Chief Minister of Assam is concerned, we have appropriately and adequately tightened the security of Honorable Chief Minister, and all the district police units have been adequately briefed about the threat that emanates. However, I would like to say that by and large, the Sikh community in Assam does not support any of these activities, and they are firmly and fully behind India. Since some of the NSA detainees had been brought to Dibrugarh, since then we have been keeping a watch on railway stations and airports so that no person comes from outside and starts creating problem here. Further, as far as investigation is concerned, whatever comes out, we would inform you in due.
US Indian Space Research Organization on Sunday successfully landed its reusable launch vehicle in an autonomous mode. ISRO demonstrated its capability to deliver low Earth orbit satellites in space and return to the ground for reuse in a subsequent mission. Here's more.
The Indian Space Research Organization successfully demonstrated the landing of its under-development reusable launch vehicle. This brings India one step closer to the dream of its own space plane. The spacecraft took off underslung by a Chinook helicopter from the aeronautical test range in Chitradurga, Karnataka in the early hours. It was raised to an altitude of 4.6 kilometers before being dropped mid-air. RLV's configuration is the same as that of an aircraft and combines the complexity of both launch vehicles and aircraft. Developing essential technologies for a fully reusable launch vehicle will enable low-cost access to space. This will strengthen India's position in billion-dollar satellite launch market. Bureau Report, Republic TV.
Viewers, even as a hunt for Amritpal is on, External Affairs Minister came down heavily on Khalistani elements. Speaking on the recent events where Indian flag was desecrated in London, Jaishankar said that India will not tolerate insult to the tricolour.
We have seen in the last few days some incidents in London, something in Canada, a little bit in Australia, in San Francisco. There is a very small minority, okay? But there are behind that minority, there are many interests. Some interests are of neighbors, all of you know which one. Some interests are actually of people who try to use it for, visa and for personal interest, that they try to project this for their advantage. And there may be others who do not, frankly, wish India well. Now, the point there is that when we establish embassies abroad, when our diplomats are performing their task, we are very clear that it is the obligation of the country where these embassies are, where our diplomats are, to provide security. After all, we provide security for so many foreign embassies out here. Now, if they do not provide security, if they do not take this seriously, if there are incidents like what you saw, there will be reactions from India. The days when India would take this lightly, I want to say, are behind us. This is not an India which will accept its national flag pulled down by somebody in the management.
Viewers, days after Rahul Gandhi insulted Hindutva icon Veer Savarkar, Shiv Sena and the BJP are holding mega Savarkar rallies across Maharashtra. Leading one such yatra in Mumbai, Chief Minister Eknath Shinde said that disrespect to Savarkar will not be tolerated. Here's a report and an exclusive conversation with the Maharashtra Chief Minister.
राहुल गांधी की ओर से दिए गए सावरकर बयान को लेकर अब बीजेपी और शिवसेना के ओर से सावरकर गौरव यात्रा पूरे महाराष्ट्र में की जा रही है। खुद इसके लिए अब महाराष्ट्र के मुख्यमंत्री एकनाथ शिंदे भी मौजूद है, जो कि इस लगभग 3 किलोमीटर की जो थाने में यात्रा की जा रही है। और खास तौर पर ये जवाब है कांग्रेस को, जो लगातार सावरकर को लेकर एक विवादित बयान दिए जाते हैं। हमारे साथ खुद महाराष्ट्र के मुख्यमंत्री एकनाथ शिंदे, हम उनसे बात करेंगे। सर, कांग्रेस की ओर से दिए जा रहे, खास तौर पर राहुल गांधी की ओर से दिए गए बयान को लेकर अब ये निर्णय लिया गया है शिवसेना बीजेपी की ओर से ये सावरकर गौरव यात्रा को
स्वातंत्र वीर सावरकर जी की गौरव यात्रा शुरू हुई है। इसमें शिवसेना, बीजेपी और सभी सावरकर प्रेमी जनता इसमें शामिल हुई है। आप देख रहे हैं कि इतने बड़े हजारों की तादाद में लोग यहाँ पर सावरकर यात्रा में शामिल है। इससे जाहिर है कि सावरकर जी का त्याग, बलिदान, देशभक्ति, राष्ट्रभक्ति व्यक्त, उनके प्रति एक भावना, अभिवादन व्यक्त करने के लिए यहाँ पर हजारों की तादाद में लोग उमड़ पड़े हैं। और इसलिए मैं सबसे पहले स्वतंत्रवीर सावरकर जी को विनम्र अभिवादन करता हूँ और उनके देश प्रेम और राष्ट्रभक्ति की गौरव यात्रा में शामिल हुए सभी लोगों का स्वागत करता हूँ।
ये न कि सिर्फ थाने में दिखाई दे रही है, न कि मुंबई में, लेकिन महाराष्ट्र के हम 288 कॉन्स्टिट्यूंसी में की जा रही है। एक बड़ा इम्पैक्ट और कहीं ना कहीं एक जवाब कांग्रेस को है कि जो कंट्रीब्यूशन सावरकर जी के पूरे देश के लिए रहा है, ये उसका जवाब।
बिल्कुल, यहाँ पर मैं और उप मुख्यमंत्री देवेंद्र फडणवीस जी और हमारे शिवसेना भाजपा के सभी पदाधिकारी, इन्होंने निश्चित कर लिया, निर्णय लिया कि पूरे महाराष्ट्र में जिले जिले में, हर विधानसभा चुनाव क्षेत्र में, तहसील में, गांव-गांव में ये स्वतंत्र वीर सावरकर गौरव यात्रा निकाली जाए। और उससे पहले आज यहाँ देख रहे हैं कि कितने बड़े तादाद में उत्स्फूर्त ऐसा प्रतिसाद जो है लोगों ने दिया हुआ है। यही प्रेम जो है देशभक्ति पर लोगों ने व्यक्त किया है, जताया है।
Viewers, top updates. Amritpal, who has been on the run, is suspected to be in UP's Merit. Now, the Punjab police has initiated a probe. They have also detained and questioned several people to verify the location of Amritpal. Maharashtra Chief Minister Eknath Shinde declared that on April 9th, he along with all his ministers and MLAs will be visiting Ayodhya to seek the blessings of Lord Ram. He also announced that during the visit, they will visit the under construction of the Lord Ram temple in Ayodhya and will also take part in the Arati.
9 तारीख को हम लोग अयोध्या जाएंगे, रामलला का दर्शन करेंगे। अयोध्या हमारे लिए एक श्रद्धा और अस्मिता का विषय है, भावना का विषय, राजनीति का मुद्दा हमारे लिए नहीं है।
Fire broke out at the LIC office located in Chennai. Now, according to sources, a fire broke out on the 14th floor of the building. Fire and rescue service personnel arrived at the spot and have taken the situation into control. Top opposition leaders led by DMK chief MK Stalin are scheduled to take part in a national conference on social justice in Delhi. This will be seen as a display of opposition unity ahead of the 2024 Lok Sabha polls. The conference will be attended by Rajasthan Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot, his Jharkhand counterpart, and Bihar Deputy CM as well. Incidents of shooting stones was reported at the T5 tunnel in the Jammu-Srinagar National Highway in Ramban. The heavy shooting was followed by a landslide which halted the traffic. Even a vehicle of Indian Army official was hit by shooting stones. In a major development in the Umesh Pal murder case, a special task force has arrested gangster Atiq Ahmed's brother-in-law Akhlaq from Meerut. Akhlaq was arrested for allegedly harboring shooters and helping them escape after the crime. Viewers, the BJP levelled a scathing attack against Aam Aadmi Party and Manish Sisodia. This comes days after court dismissed the plea of Sisodia, claiming that Sisodia is the mastermind of the alleged scam. BJP national spokesperson Shehzad Poonawalla said that the Aam Aadmi Party leaders repeatedly claimed that investigative agencies could not find anything at Sisodia's residence during the searches. But according to Poonawalla, the probe agencies found 100 crore rupees from his residence.
मैं आपको पहले सुनाना चाहता हूं कि कोर्ट ने जब फिर से एक बार मनीष सिसोदिया अक्यूज नंबर 1 शराब घोटाले में उसे राहत देने से इनकार किया, उनकी बेल को रिजेक्ट किया, तो किस प्रकार से और किस आधार पे उस बेल को रिजेक्ट किया गया? क्योंकि कई बार इनके कई प्रवक्ता आते हैं आम आदमी पार्टी के और कहते हैं चुनौतीपूर्ण तरीके से कि क्या मनीष के यहां से झुंझुना भी मिला, मनीष के यहां से झुंझुना भी मिला। आज मैं आपको बताना चाहता हूं कि झुंझुना नहीं 100 करोड़ मिला, और भारतीय जनता पार्टी को नहीं, कोर्ट को मिला। पैरा 44 पढ़कर सुना रहा हूं, ये पैरा 44 पेज 29 और पेज 30। Thus it is clear from the above discussion, ये कोर्ट कह रहा है, that the applicant Manish Sisodia had played the most important and vital role in the above criminal conspiracy, and he had been deeply involved in the formulation as well as the implementation of the said policy to ensure achievement of objectives of the said conspiracy. The payment of advance kickbacks of rupees 90 to 100 crores was meant for him, इसको अंडरलाइन कीजिए, and other colleagues in the GNCTD, and rupees 20 to 30 crores out of the above are found to have been routed through the co-accused Vijay Nair, Abhishek Bonapalli and approver Dinesh Arora, and in turn certain provisions of the excise policy were permitted to be tweaked and manipulated by the applicant Manish Sisodia to protect and preserve the interests of the liquor lobby and to ensure repayment of the kickbacks to the said lobby. इसका अर्थ क्या है? इसका अर्थ यह है कि मनीष सिसोदिया के घर में केवल झुंझुना नहीं है, मनीष सिसोदिया और कंपनी को 100 करोड़ की घूस मिली है। यह आज सत्यापित, स्थापित, स्पष्ट हो चुका है कोर्ट के माध्यम से।
And viewers, let's get you some global updates. Despite Netanyahu pausing the judicial overhaul plans on Monday, protests continue in Israel for the 13th week. Take a look at this report for more.
Protesters in Israel returned to the streets to oppose a controversial plan to revamp the country's legal system. This comes despite Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's suspension of the changes earlier in the week. The protesters gathered in Tel Aviv for the 13th weekly demonstration, raising Israeli flags and banners against plans to weaken the Supreme Court. The protests have been going on since Netanyahu's government introduced the changes. However, earlier this week, Netanyahu delayed the overhaul plan that deeply divided Israelis, saying he wanted to avoid civil war by making time to speak a compromise with political opponents. Protest organizers, however, vowed to keep up the pressure, calling for the plans to be scrapped. Agency report for Republic TV.
And viewer Salim Durrani, the legend India cricketer of the 1960s, with the movie star looks and a penchant for hitting monstrous sixes on demand, he has died. In fact, he was 88 years old, and the entire India is mourning the loss of the legendary cricket star.
The debonair India cricketer of the 1960s with movie star looks and a penchant for hitting monstrous sixes on demand breathed his last today. Cricket legend Salim Durrani passed away at the age of 88 owing to a prolonged illness in Jamnagar. Prime Minister Modi mourned the demise of India's debonair cricketer Salim Durrani. Remembering his key contribution to India's rise in the cricketing world, Prime Minister said Durrani was an institution in himself. Former Indian cricketer Ravi Shastri too expressed his grief. Durrani has left an indelible mark on Indian cricket. Durrani not only gave beautiful moments on the cricket field but also on the big screen. Bureau Report, Republic TV.
Howrah is becoming the center point of Bengal politics, and a lot of developments are there. We have shown what you are writing here, the very strong words you have written. But what is your first reaction on camera, sir?
Strong words are followed by strong action. Strong action will be taken. Under no circumstances will anyone be allowed to take the law in their hands. They will be brought to book. Life and property of the citizens will be protected.
Violence erupted during Ram Navami procession in different parts of Bihar. This particular go down was set ablaze by miscreants when the Ram Navami procession was passing through this particular area. The fire tenders have been roped in to douse the fire still, even after around 16 to 17 hours have passed. And this particular go down was damaged and vandalized by the miscreants, and see the debris being removed. Large number of vehicles, e-rickshaws and auto rickshaws have been damaged. 4-wheelers, 7 people have been arrested, section 144 have been imposed.
Troubled with the words that they've used, Mr. Something. Are you troubled with the words?
And that is Christian Michel. First visual on your scene. Christian, would you want to speak? Christian, would you give facts to India? That's speech is up right now. He's been arrested. Because it was a case, I believe, that was closed by the police itself. They're trying to stop us.
Mr. Davuna, welcome to Republic Bangla. For the
Thank
first time, Republic Network is here to interview you, and most importantly, in the backdrop of Raj Bhavan, the Jan Raj Bhavan. What do you want to say about this Raj Bhavan? এই মানুষের Raj Bhavan করে দিয়েছেন, এই কোটা বাড়িটা এখন মানুষের বাড়ি. What do you want to say?
Jan Raj Bhavan symbolizes something transformational in it. Raj Bhavan represents the Raj. Jan Raj Bhavan represents the people. Raj Bhavan is legitimately to be called Jan Raj Bhavan because who gave the authority to the governor to occupy the Raj Bhavan?
People.
Well, the Constitution of India. Who made the Constitution? The Constitution of India was made by we, the people of India. Give it to ourselves, this Constitution. Therefore, if anybody is made the dispenser of India's destiny as the governor, Bharat Bhagya Vidhata, it is because we the people permitted him. Therefore, in spirit and letter, this institution belongs to the people. Therefore, anybody who occupies this institution, his first duty is to the people, his second duty is to the people, his third duty is to the people.
You just said that you're going to learn Bangla here, and most importantly, every single Bangla word every single day. আপনি বলেছিলেন এখানে হাতিখড়ির পরে প্রতিদিন একটা করে বাংলা শব্দ আপনি শিখবেন. How many Bengali words have you learned so far? কতগুলো বাংলা শব্দ আপনি এতদিনে শিখলেন?
I wish I could tell you আমি বাংলা শিখেছি, আমি বাংলা শিখব. And my first speech in Bengali will be there on the New Year Day on 15th of April. I would like to speak to my Bengali brothers and sisters in Bengali.
That's a wonderful thing. দারুণ বিষয়. মিস্টার গভর্নর, একটা বিষয় নিয়ে এখন গোটা বাংলা খুব চিন্তিত, তা হলো হাওড়ার বিষয়. এই বিষয়ে আপনার প্রথম প্রতিক্রিয়াটা এই মুহূর্তে রিপাবলিক বাংলায় আমরা দেখাচ্ছি এবং এই মুহূর্তে সাক্ষাৎকারটা আপনার থেকে নিচ্ছি. মিস্টার গভর্নর, হাওড়া is becoming the center point of Bengal politics, and a lot of developments are there. We have shown what you are writing here, the very strong words you have written. But what is your first reaction on camera, sir?
You are referring to strong words. Strong words are followed by strong action. The life and property of the ordinary citizen is to be protected. There will be zero tolerance on miscreants taking the law in their hands. Government will act in a concerted manner, effective manner, proactive manner to ensure that those who thought they can take liberties with the law will soon realize that they are in a fool's paradise. Strong action will be taken. Under no circumstances will anyone be allowed to take the law in their hands. They will be brought to book. We will see that the rule of law is established. Life and property of the citizens will be protected.
You are the custodian of this state. You are the custodian of the state government, and most importantly, the chief secretary, the home secretary are bound to report to you. আপনি এই গোটা পশ্চিমবঙ্গের অভিভাবক, এবং অভিভাবক হিসাবে এর আগেও আমরা দেখেছি আগের রাজ্যপাল যেরকম ভাবে কাজ করেছেন, এক্ষেত্রেও দাঁড়িয়ে আপনাকে মুখ্য সচিব, স্বরাষ্ট্র সচিব প্রত্যেকে রিপোর্ট করে. What do you want to say about the entire incident that is taking fold, and what's the role of the state government?
What has happened in Howrah on the street by way of arson looting is to be deplored, and all steps will be taken to ensure that normalcy is established. The state government, the central government, all will act in unison under the constitution, and we are doing that. Result is there. No one will be allowed to do whatever with anything, any misdeed which the miscreants create. And on that particular occasion, to the context, I can say, if Hanuman set fire to Lanka, that was for dharma. But anyone who resorts to fire through adharma will be made to swallow their own fire. Otherwise, those who are mandated to douse the fire will douse it. That is what we see in Howrah. No repeat performance will be there.
আপনি বলছেন যে যারা আগুন জ্বালিয়েছে, হনুমান আগুন জ্বালিয়েছিল ধর্ম প্রতিষ্ঠার জন্য, কিন্তু যারা অধর্ম প্রতিষ্ঠার জন্য আগুন জ্বালাচ্ছে তাদের they will be taken to the book. You are saying that Hanuman had set fire in Lanka to establish dharma there, but whoever is endorsing, promoting adharma will be brought to books, and that's a strong message. Have you given the strong message to the state government?
Messages are not given in words. Messages are to be reflected in the deeds. That is for anybody to judge.
Mr. Governor, on the other hand, you have been a proud Malayali, and Bengalis and Malayalis have a strong connection. আপনি কেরালা থেকে এসেছেন, মাছ খেতে ভালোবাসেন, মিষ্টি খেতে ভালোবাসেন. মিলটা কোথায় মানে এই রাজনীতিটা সেটাও একটা কমন ফ্যাক্টর you are from Kerala politics is a staple food for Malayalis and Bengalis mishti or sweets are a staple food for Bengalis and Malayalis fish is a staple food for Malayalis and Bengalis what's the connection that you want to find here
More than the food, both Malayalis and Bengalis are interested in the food for thought. Lot of ideas, ideologies, lot of thinking, lot of philosophy, lot of vision comes from both the countries, both the states. In fact, what I saw in Bengal is the affinity to culture. Every Bengali is a votary of his culture. And Bengal has a great culture. I would say that if you prick a Bengali with a needle, first culture will lose out, then only blood will come. That is the importance which Bengal gives to culture. That is why Bengal is today and in the past and will be in the future. What Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore said, a place where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free. That is the characteristic of Bengal. That is why it was said, what Bengal thinks today, India thinks tomorrow. I salute my brothers and sisters in Bengal. It's a great state, great people, and great culture.
What about those who are sitting in roads protesting? They have also been here trying to meet you. যারা রাস্তায় বসে আছে, যারা আন্দোলনকারী, যারা চাকরি প্রার্থী, কাজ হারিয়েছে যারা, তাদেরকে আপনি কি বলবেন? What do you want to say to them?
Protest and dissent show the health of democracy. People should have the freedom to express their feelings, to ventilate their grievances. Democracy permits that. Therefore, protests are welcome because it will lead to some corrective action. But when it comes to playing with one's own life, that is something, human life is very precious. Of course, causes are very important. But when we see that somebody is going to sacrifice his life for a cause, it is up to the silent majority to see that we prevail upon him and see that life is protected. I think what I have seen here is that there is always a solution to any problem. Try to find the right solution. What is required is a transition from confrontation to conciliation, from antipathy to empathy, from passion to compassion. If that is mixed in the right proportion, I think any problem in democracy can be solved. Indian democracy and people of Bengal, they have the inner strength to face any problem and find an appropriate solution.
Mr. Governor, in the polity of Bengal, the opposition leader and other leaders, specifically from the chief opposition party, in fact Shubhendu Adhikari also, they are repeatedly tweeting saying that you should be very alarmed, you should be very cautious about the whole thing that is being transferred here because a lot of people are there who may misguide you. শুভেন্দু অধিকারী বলছেন গোটা বাংলাতে অনেক মানুষ আছে, অনেক রাজনীতিবিদ আছে এবং অনেকের সাথে আপনি গোপন বৈঠক করছেন, তারা হয়তো আপনাকে ভুল বোঝাতে পারে, মিসআন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং হতে পারে. What do you want to say on that?
Dialogue will lead to understanding. We should try to find the other man's point of view. Then you will realize that your point of view is to be tempered. I think that balancing act is required. That is required not only in Bengal, everywhere it is required. As Sri Butha said, the golden mean. That is what I am trying to pursue. And I am getting a lot of cooperation from all sections of Bengali society.
Do you want to call the Chief Secretary, the Home Secretary and others regarding any kind of law and order collapse in the state? যদি আপনার প্রয়োজন হয় আবারও আপনি কি মুখ্য সচিব, স্বরাষ্ট্র সচিব ওনাদেরকে ডাকবেন যদি কোনো আইন শৃঙ্খলার অবনতি হয়?
These functionaries are all part of the constitutional system. Whenever a decision is to be taken, these officers who are the implementing officers, they also have to be taken along. That is a process which is going on, and it is going on very smoothly, seamlessly. And I am happy about the type of working relation which exists here. It will all lead to the welfare of the people, and it will all ensure that good governance is established here. And good governance is something which India's Prime Minister, Sri Narendra Modi, lays emphasis upon. That is what we are trying to implement here through cooperation, constructive cooperation.
Mr. Governor, have you been hard or have you been soft as of now? আপনি কি একদম শক্ত হতে পারেননি নাকি এখনো? আপনি এখনো নরম সরম হয়ে আছেন, এখনো চোখে চোখ রেখে কথা বলতে পারছেন না নাকি?
I'm hardly soft and softly hard.
You're hardly soft and softly hard. It's a wonderful metaphor that you are saying. Sir, another question, and this question is now one of the most popular question in Bengal now. Is there any possibility of 355, 356? Is there any possibility of President's rule if the things are not working properly in the hands of state government? একটা প্রশ্ন, যে প্রশ্নটা গোটা বাংলার মানুষ এই মুহূর্তে কার্যত এটাকে সবচেয়ে জনপ্রিয় প্রশ্ন এবং সবচেয়ে কৌতূহলের প্রশ্নে বদলে ফেলেছে। 355 ধারা, 356 ধারা জারি হবে কিনা, রাষ্ট্রপতি শাসন জারি হবে কিনা, আপনি প্রয়োজনে রাষ্ট্রপতি শাসন জারি করবেন কিনা?